Hello and welcome to this short video about how to create a Donorfy report in Excel. My name's Robin, I'm the product manager here at Donorfy, and we have a few slides here to show you how all this works, and then we're going to look at Excel and set a couple of reports up as examples. So first of all, let's look at the reasons why you might want to consider using Excel as a reporting tool. First of all, it's a ubiquitous product. You probably have it already. It's a convenient way to analyze data. It's got some very powerful tools in it to do that, and you can produce all kinds of different graphics, as you know, charts, pivot tables, data lists within Excel. So it's familiar and probably available for you. Secondly, it may be that lists in Donorfy have some limitations for you in terms of how they can produce totals, maybe how they can be visualized as charts, that kind of thing. So when lists aren't enough for you, Excel can jump into the gap there. Next, you may be tempted to export data from Donorfy as CSV files and import it into Excel files. Well, with this feature we're looking at today, there's no need to do exports imports, so we wouldn't recommend you do that. Obviously it means you then have unencrypted CSV files perhaps sitting around on your hard drive, which could be a data protection risk. So when you want to do some reporting like that, you want a tool that can connect directly to Donorfy rather than export import. So that's another good reason for using this feature. And then lastly, it may be that you don't want to go through the learning curve of using Power BI or Tableau or something like that, which are purpose-built, more techie oriented reporting tools. So this sits in the middle really for those who don't really want to go that far. So let's look at what the solution actually is. So your Donorfy database is sitting there on the left, and you have Excel there on the right. And they both speak the same language in terms of how they access or make available their data in Donorfy's case, or how they access external data in Excel's case. And that language is called OData. That's the protocol that is used to make data securely available out of Donorfy. It's encrypted, it's a standard format that's used industry-wide. And Excel can actually look out beyond its own four walls and use an OData feed, such as the one provided by Donorfy, in order to bring data into it securely without imports and exports. Just bring it directly in, remain connected to Donorfy, and then refresh that data from time to time. So it's a proper way, really, of looking at your data through the lens of Excel. So let's go through the steps of how that works. You first of all create a normal Excel workbook, and as you do so, you go to the Data menu, click on Get Data, choose Data from Other Sources, choose OData Feed within that, and that will then prompt you for a URL. The format of the URL that you will be using is much like the one shown on the right hand side, identical until you get to that last 10-character thing at the end, which is your API key. So you would need to find your API key before you get going, and that can be found in Settings in Donorfy, Configuration, System Settings, and then see your API key in there. So make a note of that so that you can add it into the end of this URL. So having entered the URL, it's then going to ask you for your credentials for your database. So you first click on the basic link on the left hand side, which will then prompt you, as you can see there, for your username and your password, and then you click connect, and that will take you through to asking you what kind of data from your Donorfy OData feed do you want to be reporting on. So you can actually mix, if you want, in the same workbook reports of different kinds, but you can see the one we've selected at the bottom there is called transactions. That's going to give us transactional data from Donorfy, but you have other elements of data such as constituents, activities, campaigns, opportunities, RPIs, and so on. And then once you've selected your transactions and clicked load, it'll load it into a worksheet on your Excel, and then it's ready for you to then build reports onto. So charts, pivot tables, data sheets can all be run from that actual data. So we're going to build a couple of examples live now, as it were, in Excel. First of all, we're going to build a transaction report and then a constituent report. So those two types of data. The transaction report we're going to build is a pivot table, which is a crosstab. You'll know from transactions in Donorfy, if you ever run a transaction list, that they are listed as rows. Sometimes you'll get multiple rows per transaction where you've got multiple allocations. So you could have an allocation or a transaction that's split between 2, 3, 10, 100 allocations if you want. But Donorfy thinks about those things as rows, but sometimes it's more convenient to see that information spread across as columns. So one transaction with maybe 5 columns for the possible allocations within that within those transactions. So we'll be building a pivot table that can do that kind of thing for us, and then we'll be looking at a data sheet where we can filter maybe high value donors or something through that as well. So let's swap over now into Excel. So here we are in Excel, and I'm going to now create a link to our data source. So get data from other sources, OData feed, which will ask me now for the URL. The URL is https demodata.donorfy.com/odata/ my tenant ID. This is a bit different to the URL we were looking at earlier because this is my demo data. I click on basic, enter my username. I've got a user here which is called reports for my particular demonstration charity. You can use your own one, or if you find it useful like I do to set up a separate user for reports, then by all means do that. Users don't cost anything extra in Donorfy. We'll click on OK, and it's now presenting us with the data types that we'd like to report on. So I'm going to choose transactions because we're doing a transaction report. Gives you a preview of the first 10 or so in there. That may not look much like transactional data. The first few columns are kind of system data, so if I scroll across you'll see more familiar things there like products, payment methods, etc. We'll click on the load button, and it's now going to load my data sheet ready for me to get going. Now on that data we're going to create a pivot table. So if I click on Insert Pivot Table, click OK, it'll put that on a new worksheet for me, and I can now choose what goes in my pivot table. So it's convenient to choose or to visualize it in your head. So let's say across the top we want columns, down the left hand side we want constituents as our rows, and we might want to put a value, the amount, into the values in the middle of the pivot table. And format that information so it looks like currency, which is what it is. So currency, there we go. And now we can see that we have a sum for each constituent of its transactions across the various products and allocations therefore within those transactions. I can put filters on here as well, so I might be interested in date paid filter, and I can pop that into the page filter at the top of the screen. I can do all, or a certain day's income, whatever it's going to be. Let's put those back onto all, or I can choose multiple entries and pick all the dates out for a particular month, or that kind of thing if you want. So you have quite a lot of flexibility about how you design your pivot table, but it's essentially using the data that it's grabbed through OData from Donorfy in order to then render it in a pivot table on this particular worksheet. Let's add a new worksheet which is going to contain our constituent report. So we'll go back to our data menu. We have to tell it to get the data again, but this time, because we've already entered our username and password, it only needs to confirm where it's coming from, and it won't ask us for all that information again. Let's check that looks right. Yeah. But it will ask us this time, what type of information would I like to receive on my data sheet? So I'm calling in constituent data. And I can turn this data sheet into the report I want. Say I'm interested in a list of people whose average donation is over £500. I can see I have a transaction average amount, so that's how much their average gift value is. And I can choose a number filter, greater than or equal to 500. I can hide some columns that I'm not interested in seeing necessarily. Let's hide those ones. Put a name in here. Hide those ones. And let's put the last name in there as well. And the first name. So now we've got a more kind of stripped down report. Rather than all the columns on offer, we've just reduced it to the ones we like. They're still in there, but they're hidden. And I can save this worksheet, this workbook, with all of its worksheets, our transactions one, our constituent one that we just created here. Save this. It's then a portable document, so it saves the data within the spreadsheet as it is. I can email that to somebody if I want to, or however I'm going to share that. But importantly, when you come back to it another time, you're going to want to refresh the information which is within it, which you can do without having to rebuild the entire report each time. So at any point you can go back to your data menu and click on refresh all, and it will go back to Donorfy, bring the new data back and update these reports with the latest data. So that's using Excel to pick up some constituent data and some transaction data from our database. So it's a connection that's always there that you can then refresh. And you can also change your workbook so that when you open it, it auto refreshes, so you don't even have to remember to refresh it each time. So let's just get back to the last slide of our presentation here, which is giving us a bit more information about some extras here with that. First of all, the data volumes. OData is a secure, encrypted, web-based protocol. It's not intended for heavyweight shifting of data around. So if you've got hundreds of thousands of rows of data, then probably not the best way to do that. I'd advise you to look at maybe our own Azure option with your database, which means you can get a faster connection to high volumes of data. But certainly for most people, data volumes are not going to be a problem to using OData. Secondly, the version of Excel that you need to run this, it may go back sooner, but we do know that Excel version 2010 and later supported OData. So it's likely that you have a version that's later than that, and you should be okay to pick up the data, albeit the menus and the actual way it prompts for things has changed over time. But you should find your way around if you use this video as a guide. And then lastly, the OData feed is not enabled by default. You do need to ask support to enable it. It doesn't cost anything, but you need to ask support to enable that. So send them a ticket, and within a minute or two, they can add that to your particular system. So don't be surprised if you tried it and it didn't work. It's maybe because you haven't had that switched on yet. So ask support to do that when you're ready to give it a go. So that's all. We hope that was useful. Look at the knowledge base. Everything I've mentioned in this is in the knowledge base at support.donorfy.com, and that's the place as well where you can create a ticket for the support team to answer. Thanks for watching.